Welcome to a journey of transformation. Every week, we explore new horizons, pushing boundaries and embracing what's next. This isn't just about technology, it's about evolving ourselves. Think of it as your weekly reset, a chance to upgrade your mindset, your skills, and your potential. We're here to help you rethink how you approach challenges, how you innovate, and ultimately, how you succeed. From powerful insights to practical strategies and game-changing knowledge, we tap into everything you need. It's about staying ahead, not just in a digital world, but in life itself, equipping you for every new beginning. Because in this fast-paced era, standing still is simply not an option. Growth is continuous. You either choose to evolve, to adapt, and to learn, or you risk being left behind. Embrace the change. This isn't just an update. It's a profound rebirth, a chance to redefine your future, to step into your power, and to truly thrive. It's about unlocking your next level. Join us on this exciting path. Embrace your new beginning. Your journey starts now.
Welcome back, Final Boss family, for another Tuesday of Tech Tuesday. My smarts, warriors, and final bosses. We're running solo tonight, Final Boss family, so get your pen and paper ready. We got some good stuff to talk about. We're in Season 4 of The Rebirth, Arc 4 The Construction, Episode number 252, The Machine is Being Installed. And by the end of tonight, that title is going to hit different. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So we try and keep current with what's happening in our world of tech. Today, we're looking at two stories. But let me make sure that we're all on the same page before we get going too far. This audience is diverse, different levels of skill, different industries that folks are in. And I never want to leave anyone behind. So let's hit our first story. First story is about GitHub. On June 1st, 2026, it went from being unlimited subscription to a metered AI utility. And we're going to discuss that in depth, but that's a big deal right there. Now, if you're not in tech, you might not know what GitHub is. So I'm going to explain it. GitHub is the platform where software developers store their code. Think of it like a shared filing cabinet for the internet. Every app on your phone, every website you visit, every piece of software running in the background of your life. Much of that code lives on GitHub. The developers use it to build things, to collaborate, and to manage their work. But GitHub is owned by Microsoft. Now, we like to use analogies. I like to say that Microsoft is like the Borg, be assimilated or die. But Microsoft doesn't need to force assimilation. It just needs to make assimilation the most convenient option. And GitHub recently made a change to the way it charges developers, specifically around the AI tools built into the platform. These are tools that help the developers write code faster using artificial intelligence. And here's why it matters. Because it's not just a billing change, it's a signal. When a company starts charging for their AI access inside a tool that developers depend on, that tells you something. It tells you that the AI layer is no longer experimental. It's no longer a bonus feature. It's becoming part of the cost of doing business. June 1 this year is primarily about GitHub Copilot, monetization, and billing changes, rather than new coding features. They didn't give you anything more, they're just starting to charge you for it. So GitHub moved Copilot into a more usage-based model and began charging for resources that were previously bundled. So there's three big changes that happen. Copilot moved to a usage-based billing. So Copilot now consumes AI credits instead of the older premium request model for most plans. Heavy users of the AI agentic features can expect costs at scale with usage. The more you use it, the more you pay. It's a big deal. So, CodePilot code reviews now consume GitHub Actions minutes. Every CodePilot code review on a private repository now uses GitHub Actions minutes in addition to AI credits. Now, your public repositories still remain exempt from the Actions minute charges, but this is still going to cost every time you do something. It's not the beginning cost, it's the layered cost deep within it. Because of that, your agentic AI workloads now became explicitly metered. So what this means is GitHub is signaling that AI agents are no longer a fixed cost feature. The more context reasoning and automated review work is performed, the more infrastructure consumption gets tracked and then billed. This is the economic layer. This is money. What we used to think was just something we could just pull up and use, now is going to cost. And it's going to cost a lot in the long haul. Now, the second story we're going to talk about tonight is about Ohio. And this is specifically about data centers being built in Ohio. Now, if you're not in tech, you might not know what a data center is. I'm going to explain that one also. A data center is just a building, sometimes an enormous building, full of computers, but not the computers you use at home, not laptops. We're talking industrial computers, servers. These are machines that run constantly, machines that store information, machines that process information. Every time you use the internet, every search, every stream, every message, every transaction, something is happening inside a data center somewhere. And right now, companies are building new data centers specifically to run AI. And you say, well, why do you have to do that? Can't you just put it on next to the other servers? No. AI requires enormous amounts of computing power, more than most people realize. And Ohio is one of the places where that physical infrastructure is going in the ground right now, as we speak. And now there are debates right now in Ohio about land use and about power consumption. So let's look at that really quick about power consumption, because we just think electricity just is there. We turn the lights on, it's there. You pay your electric bill, you're good to go. But there's numbers driving this debate. There were initial power requests submitted by the data center developers, initially requested 30,000 megawatts from AEP Ohio. AEP is the power company in Ohio. Now, think about this for perspective. Ohio's peak statewide electricity demand is typically around 8,000 to 10,500 megawatts. Translation is data centers initially asked for roughly 3 times of Ohio's peak load. So you're like, oh my God, you're going to increase the load on an already strained power grid 3 times. Now, after utilities demanded real contracts, when they required financial commitments, what happened was the initial inquiries asked for 30,000 megawatts. The paid engineering study says, nah, we need 13,023 megawatts. Then the binding contracts were 5,642 megawatts. Now, even after filtering speculative projects, 5,642 megawatts is still more than half of Ohio's entire peak electrical demand. You're talking about an entire state. We're not talking about a town or a city or even an area or region. We're talking an entire state. So AEP, which is the power grid for Ohio, their current data center pipeline, they report they have 17,861 megawatts of contracted data center projects through 2035. Their peak demand is roughly 8,000 to 10,500. Think about this, lock that in. The planned data center load now exceeds the power demand of all existing Ohio customers combined. Combined. There's a proposed project called SoftBank in Pinkton, Ohio. 10,000 megawatts of projected demand. This, just put this in scale. This is equivalent to 9 nuclear reactors. That's how much power we're talking. 9 nuclear reactors worth of power. Estimated $33 billion of dedicated power plant. This is going to consume roughly 1/3 of Ohio's current generation capacity, all by itself. And that's not a data center. That's a power company with a data center attached. So it's absolutely insane when you start thinking about it. So Meta's Ohio expansion. Meta's Ohio projects are tied to a gigawatt Prometheus data center campus, nuclear power agreements totaling up to 6.6 gigawatts of future generation support. This is massive, massive growth, massive demand that the infrastructure is just not there. So recently, in order to support that, you have to have utility build out. You have to be able to support that kind of load. So AEP recently increased the planned infrastructure investment to $78 billion, primarily due to AI and data center load growth. 7 gigawatts of load agreements have already been signed in a single quarter. More than half of what the entire state uses has already been committed to in the single quarter. This is how fast this is growing. So if you remember nothing else, just remember this. Ohio's peak demand, 8 to 10 gigawatts. Data centers requested 30 gigawatts. The contracted projects are 17.9 gigawatts, more than the entire state's demand. One proposed campus alone is 10 gigawatts. So the reason why the lawmakers, utilities, environmental groups, and residents are all fighting is simple. I mean, they're not arguing about a few server buildings here and there. They're trying to determine if it should transform a significant portion of its electrical grid into an AI power grid. And that's the scale of what's being proposed. That doesn't even take into consideration water consumption, because these massive data centers have to cool these massive servers. They generate a lot of heat. So what's that going to mean for local communities? When you have a farm next door and a massive data center moves in, puts this big building up, and now suddenly you don't have any water for your farm. That's a physical layer. So we talked about the economic layer with GitHub. Now we're talking about the physical layer of what this actually means. And Ohio is only one example of what's happening across the country. This isn't just limited to Ohio. This is everywhere in the entire country all at once. So we have the economic layer, we have the physical layer. We have one story about how AI is being priced, and we have one story about how AI is being built. Now, when we put these together, this is going to tell us a much bigger story. This tells us that the machine is moving from imagination to installation. Think about that. Now, we've arrived at the question that's been sitting in the background all night. What happens after consolidation? Now, we've talked about discovery. We've talked about adoption. We've talked about dependency. Once we become dependent on this stuff. We just recently talked about construction and consolidation. So the next question that you already know is coming is this. If a handful of organizations end up owning most of the infrastructure, what happens next? Now, before we go any further, I just want to say I am not Nostradamus. I don't predict the future. This is for entertainment purposes only. This is not a prediction. This is not fear-mongering or anything. This is just pattern recognition. Remember how we get started tonight. We study the machine. We don't argue with the decorations. It's pretty easy. Machines have patterns. History has patterns. Infrastructure has patterns. And one pattern appears over and over again. And here it is. When something becomes essential, governance follows. So let me explain that in a way that's pretty easy to understand. We're going to talk about something that everybody knows about. So let's talk about electricity. At one point, in the beginning, electricity was a novelty. It was a luxury. It was something fascinating. It was rare. It just wasn't everywhere. But then it became infrastructure. Then it became necessary. Now, once it became necessary, rules appeared. The rules of standards, regulations, and oversight. And why? Because society became dependent upon it. The same exact thing has happened with water. Water, you want to drill a well, it's highly regulated. It's now super controlled. You don't just get to go out in your backyard and drill a well and pump your own water. No, you have to ask permission. And in many places, you have to put a meter on your water. You don't just get to drill water and pump water out of the ground. You now have to pay for the water you pump out of the ground. The same things happen with telecommunications. It used to be a fun thing to do. Now it's built into everything we do. And there's a lot of regulations around it. And if you want to talk about regulations, let's talk about banking. So once dependency reaches a certain threshold, you're dependent on it, you need it, governance follows. And it's not because somebody planned it, it's because the system demands it. Now, let's just stop for a second, because I think that that's one of the most misunderstood ideas in modern society. People often think that the control comes first, but it's not the way it goes. Historically, dependency usually appears first. Then governance arrives afterwards. Dependency creates the need. Governance becomes the response. That's the way that works. It has historically been that way. Lather, rinse, repeat. Now, think about AI. Imagine 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Not because I'm claiming a specific timeline. This is just an experiment, a thought process. Imagine businesses rely on AI. Imagine healthcare relies on AI. Imagine education relies on AI. Logistics. Imagine that relies on AI. How about customer service? Now, we already know software development is already relying on AI. And imagine governments relying on AI. Now, we've talked about that in a recent episode of the Big 12, the seats at the table. All of these other things are already moving towards relying on AI. They're already there. And at some point, this conversation is going to change. The question is no longer, can AI do this? Because that's where we're at right now. The question is going to rapidly become, how should AI be managed? Now, notice, those are two completely different questions. The first one, it's a technology question. Simple. Second one, that's a governance question. And that's where I think most people, they're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking at and keep asking the same question. How smart is AI going to become? When are we going to reach AGI? When are we going to reach ASI? I mean, don't get me wrong. That's important, of course. But that's not important at all when you look at the big picture. The big picture is this. How integrated will AI become? Because integration changes everything. Think about that. Integration changes everything. It's no longer a hobby. It's no longer a fringe. It's now part of your daily life. Now let's return to the machine. So far, we've been talking about infrastructure, tracks, networks, power grids, data centers. We connect everything with fiber optic, computing power, utilities. We talked about all that. So here is what I need you to understand. Infrastructure creates dependency. Dependency creates permanence. Permanence creates governance, and governance creates rules. That's a pattern. That's not Nostradamus. That's not predicting. That is the hard pattern that exists. And it's never going away. It's never changing. That's written in stone. Now, here's something I find fascinating. And this connects directly back to what I just said about governance. Most people think that the most important moment in a technological revolution is the invention. They think that's the moment. The light bulb was created. That's when it mattered. That's not when it mattered. No, the important moment is not the invention. The important moment is when it becomes normal. The day the technology becomes boring. Think about electricity. Nobody gets excited when they flip on a light switch. Now, think about the internet. Nobody gets excited when a web page loads. Let's move on. Think about smartphones. Nobody gets excited when they send a text message. And here's why. The technology has disappeared into daily life. It's no longer exciting, wonderful, new. It's just part of life. And that's when it became powerful. Because the less visible a system becomes, the more foundational it usually is. And here's a connection. Technology becomes invisible. Governance doesn't wait anymore. It has to show up. And here's why. Stakes are too high and too embedded to ignore. It cannot be the wild, wild west. It has to be controlled. Otherwise, it will fail. And I think AI is moving that direction. It's like every other technological development we've had, they've all moved the same direction. The future may not be AI as a separate thing. It's not going to be a separate thing. Right now it is because that's what we see it as. But the future of AI is going to be embedded into everything. And it's going to become so embedded that people are going to stop talking about it. Just like we stopped talking about electricity. Just like we stopped talking about internet protocols. Just like we stopped talking about fiber optics. It's not even a thing we talk about anymore. We don't care because it's just part of what makes life happen. And I think that's why tonight's stories actually matter. And it's not because GitHub changed their billing. It's not because Ohio is debating data centers. Those are just receipts. This is just proof. This is just showing us what's happening. This is the proof that the machine is moving from one stage to another. Those receipts just tell us where we are. That's all it is. They tell us where we are in that process. Now, here's where I want to connect this episode back to some of the conversations we've had over the past couple of years. We've talked about administrative automation, big time. We've talked about reputation systems. We've also talked about digital identity. We've recently talked about algorithmic decision making. Think about your insurance company. It's going to use AI to decide if you get that health care you need or not, whether your prescription is authorized. It's all going to be decided by algorithms. We've talked about credential systems and scoring systems. We've talked about that once we have a digital currency, the next thing that comes is a social credit score. So that you have a diesel truck and you go to the gas station to try and buy diesel for your truck, and your credit card's not going to work, not because you don't have money, but because your score is going to say you're a polluter and you can't buy diesel for your truck. Because everything you do is going to be completely 100% monitored. and you're going to have a score associated with you. And if you're a polluter, you're going to be evil and bad, and you're not going to be able to buy diesel for your truck. And we've talked about machine-assisted governance. That's like happening right in front of our eyes. And it's not because any one of these things is guaranteed, because they're not guaranteed. But what are they? Think of this as logical extensions of infrastructure and look at it from that perspective. Let me give you another example that we can talk about. Let's think about highways. Now, it mattered when the car was invented, but we really couldn't use them because we didn't have roads that were good enough. But once the highways existed, we could start using the cars. And once the highways existed, the rules followed. What do we have? Speed limits. And we know this is all here because every one of us has to deal with this. Speed limits, licenses. You're not going to drive your car without a license. Insurance requirements. You have to have insurance. You have to register your vehicle. Many places you have to have it inspected. So what happened? The infrastructure came first. The highways were built, and then the governance followed. The rules followed. And that's not rocket science. That happened. That's in front of you right now. That's how it works. That's how that system functions. And there's no changing it. There's no going back on it. It's there. It's now embedded. It's now part of that structure. Now, imagine your AI infrastructure is becoming as normal as highways. So what follows? Now, that is the question. Not because anyone knows the exact answer. Nobody knows the answer right now. But it is the next logical place to look. And when you look at that, you need to look at that in the same way that you look at things like electricity, highways, etc. Because the same steps are going to be followed. At least if you start looking that direction, you can have an idea of what's coming. And we are seeing the absolute structure change with GitHub, enormous example that it is going to be treated more like utility. You pay for what you use. Now, let's zoom all the way back out. Imagine somebody looking back 20 years from now. What might they see? Okay, so let's stop and look back 20 years back from today. When was that? 2006? That was 20 years ago. Let's go back 40 years ago, 1986. My goodness, we had none of this technology, none of it. So, do we remember the moment certain things occurred? Not really. So, what might you see if you look back 20 years in the future to today? Are you going to remember the exact billing changes? Are you going to remember those data center debates? No, because they're already going to be built. They're already going to be there. Are you going to remember specific model releases? No, you're not going to remember any of those fine details. But you may recognize this period as the transition point. Because this is the moment when AI stopped being a curiosity. This is the moment where AI stopped being an experiment. This is the moment when AI stopped being a novelty and became infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't need headlines. Infrastructure doesn't need hype. Infrastructure simply becomes part of reality. And in our world, you don't reverse reality. It's just, oh. So we talked about some things earlier. I'm going to lock in a little bit now so that we can remember something out of this episode. We talked about discovery. The question was, what is this? That's what discovery is. Second stage we talked about was adoption. And people asked, can this help me? Makes sense, right? That's adoption. Third stage is dependency. And that is, how do I live without it? Once we get to that, we go to the fourth stage, which is construction. How do we build it? Now, we're now right there. What's coming next? The fifth stage, consolidation. The people are going to ask, who owns it? And that's going to be the big question. It's not going to be public anymore. It's not going to be out for everybody to use at their own free will. It's going to be owned. And after that comes governance. And the people are going to ask, what are the rules? And there are going to be very specific rules of engagement. There are going to be very specific rules of how you're allowed to use this technology and how you're going to have to pay to play. Now, whether it happens in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years is not the point. That doesn't matter. The point is understanding the direction of what we're traveling. The point is understanding where the machine is headed. We also have to understand the incentives. There's big money in this right now, like big money. Then you have to understand the pattern. And this is why we study the machine and we don't argue with the decorations, because we look at patterns. We constantly look to understand where the machine was at, where it is now. Let's us also understand where is it going. Because once you understand the pattern, the individual headlines, they stop surprising you because you already know where it's going. Look, the receipts make sense. GitHub, it makes sense. That massive move makes sense. The data centers, as much as we don't like them, they make sense. In order to feed those, what's it take? Power grid expansion. That makes sense. Because of that, what do you have to do? To make those things happen, you have to have infrastructure investment. And it makes sense. All of it fits. All of it points to the same conclusion. The same thing we see. If you open your eyes and look, the machine is no longer being imagined. Right now, the machine is being installed. Think about that. The machine is no longer being imagined. The machine is being installed right now. And it's a very different world than the one we were living in just a few years ago when we didn't even know what the word AI meant. We didn't even know what artificial intelligence was. It was just something sci-fi in the movies. So it's just poof. You have to take a breath. You have to stop and go, okay, this is not a surprise. You just have to see the moves as they happen, understand what they are. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the insanity that goes on to distract you and take away your attention. That's not what matters. So let's bring it home. At the beginning of tonight's show, I told you I was looking at two stories. One was about software developers, and one was about data centers. And at first, they look unrelated. They don't touch each other. Now, I hope you see why I think they're actually the same story. The one story showed us the economic layer. The other story showed us the physical layer. One showed us the cost of intelligence. And the other shows us the infrastructure of intelligence. Together, they revealed something larger. They revealed stage 4, construction. And if construction is underway, then the next question becomes obvious. Who owns the infrastructure? The public or private? Who survives consolidation? Do you think the little guys are going to do well when the big guys take over? They have all the power, the computing power. Who survives that? Who benefits from dependency? That's a big question. That's one of those questions you have to really look and pull the curtain back. And when I say pull the curtain back, I'm talking about the Wizard of Oz. Pull back the curtain. Who benefits from dependency? Now, once you understand who benefits, eventually you understand who writes the rules. And these are not questions we can answer tonight. We just can't. All we can do is ask the questions. But these are the questions for the years ahead. And these are the questions that I think are worth watching because the future rarely arrives all at once. It's going to arrive piece by piece, receipt by receipt, building by building, policy by policy, until one day everyone wakes up and realizes the machine is already here. And I think that by the time we realize that, the machine's already alive. Just saying. Look, the pattern isn't new, but here's something important because never do people ever hear the conversations like this. Somebody eventually is going to say, Mike, are you saying this was planned? I'm like, no, it's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that systems tend to evolve in predictable ways. And we've seen this movie before. This is not the first time we've seen it over and over again. Let's go back 100 years. Come on. When electricity arrived, what did people see? They saw light bulbs. What did they not see? They didn't see the infrastructure. They did not see the power plants, the transmission lines, the standards and the regulators and the meters and the billing systems. The only thing they saw was the visible technology of the light bulb. But the invisible technology was the network. And eventually, that network becomes more important than the actual light bulb. Same thing happened with automobiles. People remember the car, but the car wasn't a revolution. The revolution was the infrastructure around the car. Think about the pieces that it takes to make cars viable. Roads, gas stations, insurance, driver's license, registration, traffic laws, repair shops, financing. An entire ecosystem emerged around a single technology. Same thing happened with the internet. People remember websites, and if you're old enough, you remember AOL, and you remember chat rooms, and you remember we first started using email. But those are just the visible pieces. The real story was fiber. The routers, the protocols, the server farms, the identity systems, the payment systems, the actual infrastructure, which makes it all work. And that's the pattern I want people to see. Most technical revolutions happen twice. The first revolution is the invention. Second revolution is the installation. Most people notice the invention. Few notice the installation. Think about that. The Wright brothers flew in 1903. Commercial aviation didn't transform society overnight. It took decades. Airports had to be built. Navigation systems had to be built. Regulations had to be built. Training systems had to be built. The airplane was invented in a day, but the aviation system took generations. And I think that AI is entering that second phase. Not invention, installation. Not experimentation, integration. Not possibility, infrastructure. We like to say this: the frog never sees the water rise. Nobody woke up one morning and discovered they depended on their smartphones. It happened gradually. One app, then another, then GPS. Think about that, how we depend on GPS instead of using a map. And if anybody remembers that you used to have a paper map in your car and that's how you found where you had to go by looking at street signs and the map, now we just plug it into the phone. How about banking, shopping? My God, Amazon, messaging. Think about this, authentication. Now that we are in the world, we have to have two-factor authentication. How many of you have to use your phone to even sign into your apps to authenticate who you are using your thumbprint, code? It's going to call you, whatever. That's verification, right? So you depend on that system for you to even function and then work until one day losing your phone felt like losing a part of your life. The dependency wasn't forced, it wasn't shoved down your throat. It accumulated one convenience at a time. They say the pathway to hell is full of good intentions. It's smooth and wide and it's a gentle slope. You don't get there in a hurry, you get there slowly. So imagine you're standing on an escalator and you're standing still. It feels like you're not moving. But 10 minutes later, you're on a different floor. That's how infrastructure works. Small changes, small conveniences, small integrations. And then suddenly society is somewhere entirely different than it was a decade earlier. So why do I keep using the word receipts? The data center isn't the story, it's just a receipt. GitHub pricing change isn't the story, it's a receipt. A new AI feature inside Microsoft Office 365 is not the story, it's a receipt. A school adopting AI isn't the story, it's a receipt. And by the way, that's happening all over the country right now. All over the place. You want to go look up some fun stuff, go look up that. Each receipt points to the same thing. The machine is no longer being tested. The machine is being installed. Now, if you remember nothing else from this section, remember this. History shows us that technologies become powerful when they become infrastructure. Infrastructure becomes powerful when it becomes dependency. Dependency becomes powerful when people stop noticing it. And that's why the most important changes that happen in any society are often the ones happening quietly in the background. Now, I've talked about a lot of things tonight, and I want to answer what might be the most important question of the entire episode, because wherever we talk about infrastructure, consolidation, and governance, somebody asks, okay, Mike, what am I supposed to do about it? Nothing that I can do. Understanding the machine, yeah, it's useful, but position yourself correctly is even more useful. Most people are preparing for AI as if they're competing against it. I don't think that's the game. I think the game is learning how to work alongside it. When tractors appeared, the best farmers didn't try and outwork the tractor. They learned how to use the tractor. When calculators appeared, the best accountants didn't try to out-calculate the calculator. When spreadsheets appeared, the best businesses didn't keep doing everything on paper. The winners always learn how to leverage the new tools. The losers try to preserve the old process. And many people are asking this question, will AI replace me? I think the better question is this. Can somebody using AI outperform me? Because that's the competition that's already happening. Can someone who's using AI outperform me? Construction isn't just happening in data centers. It's happening in careers. It's happening in businesses. It's happening in skill sets. The machine is being installed. And the people who learn how to interface with it early gain leverage. The market is going to reward outcomes. Always has, always will. You don't get rewarded for technical trivia. Trivia is trivia. Who cares? There's a new skill hierarchy. And if you want to write this down, this is a good one. This is a skill hierarchy. Prompting, workflows, agents, automation, and context engineering. And here's the best part about this. None of those require a PhD. Most just require curiosity and effort. And if you remember nothing else, remember this. The people most likely to thrive are the people who learn how to combine human judgment with machine capability. That's the future. The future may belong to teams of humans and machines working together. The construction phase is creating opportunity. The resources are available, and many of them are free. And now is the time to take advantage. The barrier isn't access anymore. The barrier is action. If you don't move, the world's going to leave you behind. The machine is being installed. The question is whether you'll be watching it happen or are you helping build it? So how can we get ahead of this wave of development? I mean, there's free resources out there, a lot of them. You just need to look and put in some effort. I'm telling you, it's insane. If you're a beginner, okay? If you're a beginner, Google AI Essentials resources. It's free. Go look it up. Google AI Essentials resources. It's going to teach you prompting, AI basics, everyday business use. Those are some big skills right there. Then you can move on to another free one. Microsoft AI Skills Initiative. Copilot, AI fundamentals, business applications. Those are things you can learn. But then you can start jumping into the next level, which is OpenAI Academy, and it's also free. Prompt engineering, AI literacy, and here's a big one, practical AI usage. That's a big deal. I'm going to give you some good stuff here. We have to take advantage of these tools while they're there. If you learn the tools now, you're not left behind. If you don't, you're going to be sitting on the bench. And if you don't think I'm telling the truth, look at all the companies laying people off right now. Tens of thousands of people being laid off. The job market is shifting. So here's a place to start. Okay? You can start with week 1, day 1 and 2. OpenAI Academy. You're learning tokens, context windows, system prompts, reasoning models, and AI agent concepts. That's the basics. You can do that in a couple of days. Day 3 and 4. Deep Learning AI Prompt Engineering course. This is for prompt engineering. You're going to learn role prompting. You're going to learn few-shot prompting, structured outputs, and context injection. Stop thinking about prompts as questions. Start thinking about prompts as programming. Then you move on to day 5 to 7. Learn how the models think. Learn prompting. Learnprompting.org. That's a place to go if you want to learn about hallucinations, context management, prompt chaining, and AI limitations. So now you learn what some of the limitations are of the system so you understand the context of the beginning and the end. What can it do? And what's the language that it speaks? That's a big deal. Week 2. You don't need to become a software developer to do this. Day 8 through 12, 4 days. Python for everybody. Only focus on your variables, your loops, functions, reading files, and writing files. Skip the advanced stuff. Just learn the basics. And it's practical things that you can put your hands on and actually do. Big deal. Now, day 13, 14, you're going to build a file renamer, a log parser, an inventory exporter. Real IT work. You're going to do something. It's not a toy project, but you can actually do something that matters. By the time you get done tinkering around a little bit, you can now move into week 3, and you're going to study the Lang, L-A-N-G, Chain Academy. It's academy.langchain.com. You're going to understand tools, memory, agents, and RAG. Don't just memorize it, understand the concepts. Then by the time you get to day 19, 21, you're going to install Olama. We're talking now a local model. Local model. Okay? Once you understand the concept of agents out in the world, you can then create agents that run locally. Local models are a big deal. Not just cloud AI. Don't depend on everything to live in the cloud. It's just somebody else's computer. Learn how to run it on your own systems, your own hardware. That's where you're going to get some power. Now, once you do that, you can install all kinds of knowledge base. You can feed into it everything you've been learning so far that now you can look things up. There's so much information out there. So much. You'll understand the basics about AI. You'll understand what these things are, not just from the inch deep, mile wide that we talk about on the podcast, but actually how these systems work. You'll understand the fundamentals. It's a big deal. Go to deeplearning.ai. There's many free short courses, 1 to 3 hour long courses, and you can learn a lot about it. There's another one called Hugging Face Learn. Open source AI. You're going to have to learn about local models. It's a big deal. But we talk about LangChain, the LangChain Academy. It's pretty fascinating. And most people think about AI, they're learning it backwards. They spend months learning how to create certain things. They never learn how to automate work, save time, and create value. The market is rewarding people right now who can use AI, not build it. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to learn neural networks and transformers. You don't have to learn model architecture. You need to learn how to produce something that is viable. Here's the skills that matter. AI prompting, AI workflows, AI agents, Python automation, local AI deployment, and then model architecture. Most people do this in reverse. We want to move the ball forward. Okay? Move the ball forward. Learn the skills that you're going to need to be competitive. I'll give you another example. Back in the day when we first had Microsoft Word and we were using word processors like WordPerfect, when we got away from the old school text only and we started getting into actual color screens, if you knew how to use WordPerfect, if you knew how to use Word and Excel, that in itself was enough to get you the job because it was special. It was new. You were able to bring a lot to the table because you knew how to use these systems. Now, it's a basic requirement. So if you want to go into a job, you better already know Office. I don't care what your job is. There's so many jobs that require that you can do spreadsheets, that you can work in spreadsheets. You can do PowerPoint presentations, and you can do these things. It matters. It used to be a big deal. Now it's just common. Everybody does it. If you don't, you're not competitive. So take that template and apply it to AI. If you don't learn how to use AI to your benefit now, it's going to be required in the very near future. Right now, with those skills, you can land yourself a decent job. 5 years from now, you're not even going to get a seat at the table. And that's what's happening rapidly, faster than we can ever imagine it happening. So take the time, spend some effort, you know, just invest in yourself. If you invest in yourself now, it'll pay dividends. And you don't have to be an engineer or be an expert. You don't have to. You just have to learn enough of the language that you can do something with it. You can become a part of the system instead of being outside of the system. It's better to be inside and have a job than be outside cold and hungry, sitting on the soup line on unemployment because you have no skills. Back in the day when the programmers that used to do punch cards and they did basic programming and COBOL programming and they got out of the industry because they got older and they retired. Well, 5 years after they retired, a lot of those folks tried to get back into the industry, but it had uh, grown so rapidly and so fast. They were just like newborns. They had no idea about the technology, and they used to be top of the heap. So it does change rapidly. It does change before you know it. You just have to always keep moving forward. When you're in the river and you want to stay at the same spot on the bank, you have to swim against the current. If you stop swimming, you go downstream. If you want to get ahead, you have to swim faster than the current. And if you want to get ahead of everybody else, you got to swim faster than everybody. And there is no such thing as taking time off. Because taking time off is what? You're not swimming anymore. And when you don't swim, where do you go? Downstream. Every time you stop, every time you take a break, if you're not swimming and maintaining, you're losing. And I know it's a hard thing because we all want to enjoy our lives. But if you want to be competitive, if you want to have a place in this system as it's growing, as it's being installed, you need to take some time, step up to the plate, do the hard thing now. It'll pay dividends later, and it'll be worth it. It will absolutely be worth it. But it's going to take that guts. It's going to take that inner drive and desire. Otherwise, you'll look at it and go, yeah, 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 and you can be left on the sidelines. You're not going to be called into the game because you're not going to have anything to offer. But you do have it at your fingertips. Use the models out there, use the tools, ask it. I want to have free resources to learn about AI. And ask the AI to tell you. It will give you access to the free resources to help you learn AI. AI will help you learn AI if you ask it. Kind of sounds a little weird, but it works out quite well. Don't Google it. Pull up your AI models. I don't care which one you use. I don't care if you're using Claude, Chat, Grok, Copilot. I don't care. Say, I want to learn AI and want to have a list of free resources that I can use as a beginner to learn as much AI as possible in a 30-day window and have it lay it out from the basics up to the more complicated. And then you can learn on your own, no cost. You don't have to pay for it when it's out there free to learn on your own. You just have to pay with time. You just have to take the effort and spend the time to learn. And if you spend the time to learn today, it'll be common knowledge to you later. If you don't take the time to learn today, you're going to be left so far behind that it's almost impossible to catch up. And that's not no place to be. Now, I am Big Mike, the Sensei. This has been the Final Boss Podcast. We are in Season 4, The Rebirth, Arc 4, The Construction. This has been episode 252. And until next time, keep asking the question behind the question because the machine rarely reveals itself on the surface. And remember, we study the machine. We don't argue with the decorations. Have a good one. Peace out.
Welcome to Tech Tuesday on the Final Boss podcast, where innovation meets attitude, and the future gets decoded one byte at a time. I'm your host, Turbotheceo, and your co-host, Mike Foth. And today we're diving deep into the tech trenches to uncover the tools, trends, and truths shaping tomorrow. Whether you're a code slinger, gadget geek, or just tech curious, this is your weekly power-up. So grab your controller, plug in, and let's level up.